Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. Our last guest who was on, a lot of people complained that she was on too short of a time. And I agree with them. I said, I'll turn her around and get her back on as soon as I can. One of the things she said was her prediction was that they would chip away at Donald Trump's lieutenants. And sure enough, Michael Flynn stepped down. Monica Crowley, a lot of people didn't really catch this whole deal. She was going to be an advisor to Donald Trump. She ultimately stepped down. What she says were false charges of plagiarism. And she was on Hannity and said, listen, this is an absolute war. I mean, they are absolutely going after Donald Trump and his lieutenants. The person who made that accurate prediction is Catherine Austin Fitts. Catherine Austin Fitts, the publisher of the Solari Report at Solari.com. Catherine Austin Fitts, thanks for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Oh, Greg, great to be back. Our last time was short, so I'm dying to talk to you about what's going on.
Well, listen, they tried to do the same thing with Jeff Sessions. I can't believe he recused himself on a phony story. It now clearly is a phony story and has morphed into, oh my gosh, treason, felony leaks, and actually police state tactics by one administration who is leaving to another administration coming in. What's your perception about what's going on? They're not going to get Jeff Sessions.
I don't think it's an accident that WikiLeaks shortly thereafter dumps out documents proving that the CIA has the capacity to do a hack and make it look like the Russians.
No.
That's an accident, Greg. So what we're watching, as you and I discussed the last time, is war games. And what you do, it's like a game of chess. You try and take out the lieutenants before you go in for the queen. So what they're doing is they're chipping away at the lieutenants. And my guess from watching this, because I played this game personally.
Yeah, they tried to take you out.
Yeah, so I was on the other side of one of these operations. And my guess is you have a very significant capacity on the Democratic side, literally hundreds of people and law firms doing surveillance and intelligence and figuring out how they can weaken the Trump team. And now what we see, I think, with some of the actions coming from the other way, including the WikiLeaks dumps, there's clearly capacity on the other side. But, the Trump team is going to have to build two lines. The key to being successful in an operation like this is you need a team. I liken it to the story of Nehemiah when the wall was broken and everybody had to have a tool in one hand and a weapon in the other hand. What you're going to have to do is put together a war team that can handle and just manage the warring back and forth between the factions, because you don't want that war to interrupt your line management team. You've got a line management team, the cabinet, et cetera, your advisors in the White House, and their job is to make America great again, because ultimately that's how you're going to be judged. That's where the general population will support you if you keep doing that. So you don't want your team to be buried by war games, but you're going to have to deal with the war games. So my guess is there's a connection between the WikiLeaks and the sort of who the factions backing the Trump team. But it looks to me like the president's going to have to put together more capacity, because this is a long distance run. This is going to keep on going.
Monica Crowley said this is unlike we've seen ever before, and you said in the pre-interview, you said, "Well, yes."
In this game, I mean, I played this game for 2 years or 3 years in Washington from 1996 to 1999. And then I continued to play it. It just got less immersive. And say I was up against a team that was, 5 to 10% capacity of what they put up against a president. But we've seen this kind of game many times before. The big difference, Greg, is that the CIA and the intelligence community and the fake news media that they basically are partnered with are not in control. And what you're seeing is too much independent media and too many independent researchers breaking through and busting up the fake news effort. So this is the first time we've seen this game when fake news was not in control, and you have much wider capacity on the internet to understand and call the game for what it is.
And you're saying fake news is the mainstream media, the Washington Post, the New York Times. That's the fake news.
Right. And within those entities, you'll have an occasional, reporter or person who's credible. So I like to look at this on a person by person basis. But basically, the mainstream media was set up by the leadership in coordination with the intelligence agencies to create and manage an official reality. I mean, we've literally seen commentators say, wait a minute, we're supposed to tell people what to think.
Yeah, Mika Brzezinski, exactly. Well,
Yeah.
but listen, the inmates do not. As a reporter in those entities, the inmates do not run the asylum. I did nothing on ABC and CNN without management approval.
Define reality. And I respectfully disagree, which is why I'm in independent media, just like you. So the question is reality created by reality, or is reality created by a combination of the intelligence agencies and the fake news media? And the fake news media is in failure mode.
Donald Trump had some good numbers with employment, which is what he's all about. I mean, he beat
Right.
expectations. He needs way more jobs than that. But then again, with some of this, what do you call it, success, he's going to spook the bond market. They're going to want to raise interest rates. And I mean, Bill Gross was out talking about how, we're a truckload of nitroglycerin riding on a bumpy road, and the 10-year Treasury has risen back up to 2.6 or so, and they raise rates 0.25%. We're looking at 2.85, and when are people going to sell? And I've had enough pain. I mean, when are they going to? Tell me about that scenario.
Well, they've been selling all along. One of the reasons the stock market's doing well is money's been shifting out of the bond market. So, it was interesting. Jeff Gundlach, I think it was in June 2016, called the end of the long-term bull market in bonds. You and I have talked about this for several years now. The long-term bull market in bonds is at an end, and yields are going to rise and continue to rise, and as they should. Savers and pension funds and insurance companies are not getting a return on their capital. So to me, this is a welcome. It depends on if you're holding a big bond portfolio, particularly long bonds, they're going to be down, yes, but interest rates are going to rise and the party's over. And one of the reasons we have a president who understands cost of capital and is screaming at everybody that it's no longer zero and is trying to inculcate that culture is because this is coming. To a certain extent, you're watching all of Washington blame Donald Trump for the end of the debt growth model. It's not his fault. He's just trying to get the culture to switch to something that reflects where the future's going.
I'm holding up your Solara report, your 2016, and it is the global harvest and what it means to investors. There's no way you can get this. Is just one quarter, one of your many publications you put out. There's charts and there's graphs and there's tons
Right.
of work and there's just tons of stuff in there. But one of the things that I bookmarked right here, I'm holding up. I put a little piece of paper. And it was to talk about your debt growth model, and that is
Right.
the pension liability for every household in California, according to your book right here, which I'm holding up, is $93,000 per family. That's what you're talking about. We can't keep growing like that. That debt, that $93,000 per family in California, it's never going to be paid, is it? I mean, that's what we're talking about.
Well, what you're seeing around the country, I called it controlled demolitions, is pension funds starting to cut benefits and starting to warn people that they might cut benefits. So, there are two things going on in the economy. You have pension funds that have made commitments that they can't keep, and you have government that have made commitments or maintaining overhead that they can't keep because, one, they created commitments they just didn't fund, number one. But, second, the economy is changing in ways, one of which is we've had very low interest rates, and so the pension funds haven't been able to get their yields. But we're coming into that. One of the websites I linked to, and I really encourage people to go see, is to look at the unfunded pension fund and debt liabilities for your state. There's an exceptionally wide range. One of the reasons I chose to live in Tennessee is the unfunded liabilities are so low. The liabilities have been really almost completely funded. And it's going to make a dramatic impact on your property taxes or your finances within your state. So, generally, Greg, Americans haven't been sensitive to the financial ecosystem around them, including state and local government. And now is a time to really, if you don't have situational awareness of how the money works around you, you're going to take on enormous risks. I just had somebody call me a few months ago from Chicago and say they had a friend who had a home appraised in Illinois for $3 million. The property taxes were raised to $55,000 a year. Now it's appraised for $1.5 million. There you go.
I'm going to circle back around to something you said in your last interview too, and I wanted to. I'm sorry I didn't do. I was sitting there thinking, listening to your excellent you know talk about being aware of your environment locally and your
Right.
taxes, like California. But I want to come back to this. You said that you would think that there were going to be arrests made with child sex trafficking and sex trafficking, and sure enough, that's a big story that they have been covering up. At town hall, I have to give them some credit. Came out and said 1,500 arrests. In one arrest in California, reported by KTLA, was 474 people, including releasing 28 sex trafficked children.
Right.
And this is coming down the pipe, right? I mean, the sex trafficking with
What I've said, Greg, because the human trafficking, the child trafficking, the pedophilia is a very deep, important story and a very bad scandal. Pedophilia for generations has been the way you create control files on people, and control files is the way you maintain a political structure that operates outside the official law and the official reality. So if you're a shadow government, if you're the intelligence agencies, if you're the secret societies, pedophilia is key to creating those control files because, if you're, for example, during the financial coup, if you steal $50 trillion, people want big bonuses unless they have control files. So it's a way of managing financial fraud on a very economic basis. But it really has gotten, it was always out of hand, but now it's been wildly out of hand. And I think it was one of the big swing policies between the Trump group and the Clinton group as to what the approach is going to be. Now, it's interesting if you look at the just explosion of arrests around the country. I think part of that is state and local enforcement reacting to the change in the wind that they clearly see, because a lot of those arrests had to have been teed up months ago. In other words, you can't just suddenly build your case and have your enforcement and be ready to indict that quickly. So these are things that were in the wind, but clearly state and local enforcement feel now free to do this. And the question is, are they building bottom up to making cases at a much higher level? I don't know if you saw this, we just saw the largest Russian bank hire the Podesta group.
Yes, I included that. Yes, Tony Podesta, the $170,000 to basically lobby to get, it's Spurbank.
Right. So what that says, apparently the Russians think they need the pedophilia networks to stand down. And I think a lot of the very Orwellian behavior we're watching in Washington is we have on both sides of the aisle, we have a significant number of people in Congress who are compromised by these. I think I've told you the story of how I bumped into it. I was working at HUD during the Franklin cover-up and scandal and really bumped into it. I've written up the story of why I believe the secretary I was working for was being blackmailed by pedophilia. So, this is very significant, and it's going to be very interesting to see how the Trump team works through it. I think there's a 50% better chance of a major pedophilia scandal this year or next. So I give it better than 50%.
Is that why they were going after Sessions so hard? Because they know he's in the anti-pedophilia.
Right. Right. I think.
Explain that. Why? Why would they go after Jeff Sessions so hard?
I think they want to get Sessions recused from the Clinton campaign investigation, and then proceed to say that all the pedophilia stuff is part of the campaign and he can't be involved. So the Russian allegations are really air cover for getting control of any investigation that could turn into pedophilia related, and they want to get it over in a special prosecutor where they can control it.
I don't think that's going to happen. That ain't going to happen. No, not now.
Well, the slapback from the faction behind Trump was, I have to say, was very effective. So
that story morphed into a treason story. That story, it's totally been, and even Clapper, the liar, the perjurer, came out on Meet the Press with Chuck Todd and said, hey, we don't have any evidence, none. And that's the story. They don't have any evidence. What they did was they took a shot at Trump and they failed and they got exposed for it. That's what happened. They got to take a shot and they lost. They were hoping to find enough junk to cover it over. They didn't. Oops.
I would be surprised though if they give up on the Russian angle yet. So I'm not convinced
they can beat that dead horse, Winnie. They can beat that dead horse, but that's a dead horse. You got to have actually somebody who actually did something. And what they did was, I want to know how they got that FISA warrant. What did they tell the judge to get that FISA warrant in Trump
So,
Tower? And
well, but
obviously,
here's the
that
thing on,
is a real
and, and,
story.
and if you look at what is clearly true, what Snowden has said, what other, William Binney has said, and what now the Vault 7 documents have said, the question was not who was listening to Trump's, it's not who was doing surveillance on the Trump team. It was how many people were doing surveillance on the Trump team. Because you have 17 intelligence agencies, you have all sorts of private intelligence agencies, and you have the fundamental digital systems of TVs, phone, computers that have zero integrity, and multiple parties have access to them. And I think the bigger question that is coming out.
Thank you, Obama.
The bigger question that's coming out is how do we build an economy with zero integrity in the digital systems, and how do we sell those products globally if there's zero integrity and everybody knows it? So you're talking about you're talking about your roads and bridges not working in a digital age and not being trustworthy. So this augurs a very significant breakdown in trust, and that's one of the reasons why it's so dangerous. And Trump is really just playing the protagonist in the story that teaches us why, you and I are talking on through the internet right now. We have 17 intelligence agencies. How many of them are recording it and distributing it to foreign intelligence agencies? How many foreign intelligence agencies are reporting it? You have such a great show. I'm assuming a lot of them are listening because they want to know what you say.
Well, they probably want to know what you say, not me.
Well, but I think they do, because again, the fake news isn't working, so they're going to have to scramble and keep up with all of us. But I think the bigger problem is the system has zero integrity. So if they went into the FISA court and they got approval, I'm assuming that was not the main conduit. The main conduit was there were many other conduits where public and private intelligence agencies were listening without that FISA warrant. The system is out of control. It's completely out of control.
Which, what I said on my weekly news wrap up, it morphed into this is a police state. This is a leaving.
No, you're a police state is where you have one centralized party who's in control. This is not a police state. This is a completely out of control. The governmental structure has lost the monopoly on force, and now you have multiple, sovereign players from around the world within any jurisdiction. So we have foreign intelligence agencies, we have private intelligence agencies, aka mercenaries, and we have government agencies all behaving in completely lawless ways, in violation of the Constitution in multiple ways, which all traces back, Greg, to the fact that the U.S. government is managed on a financial basis outside the Constitution. And once you can finance all these different parties outside the Constitution, then you can have multiple parties behaving outside the Constitution, breaking the law. You've torn up the Treaty of Westphalia, and you've got a completely out of control lawless system.
And you have inside these factions, you don't have just one congruent faction. Right. You have people warring against each other.
Right. So
like on Hannity, one of his guests blurted out
the CIA. There is no such thing as the CIA, because you're talking about scores of thousands of people as well as scores of thousands of contractors. The biggest problem, I think, in all of this is not the civil service. Not to say that the civil service couldn't use some support to, become as excellent as it can be. The biggest problem is you have created a legal and financial infrastructure that allows private companies to receive government money on a non-accountable basis in the literally trillions of dollars doing highly classified functions, and they are out of control. And the scariest thing, if you look, for example, one of the companies that have had numerous allegations against them about and documented about slave trafficking, narcotics trafficking, financial fraud, all sorts of stuff is DynCorp. DynCorp is now owned by a private equity firm. The lead of that firm is Steven Feinberg, who's now wandering around going on naval ships with the president, and the president's talking about bringing him in to do an overview of the intelligence agencies. Well, the fox is in the henhouse.
You just mentioned the sex trafficking. Is that their? And I would just circle back to that just for a second. So I don't
Right.
think I finished that one thought, which I just not your fault, my fault. Are they? Is that the biggest fear for these people, for the people that they're controlling, quote unquote? Is that I mean, Denny Hastert, he was Speaker of the House, and of course he was into the child sex trafficking thing. He was into pedophilia. And are they? Is that their biggest fear, to be exposed? And is that what Trump's one of his big weapons is? Okay, we're going to actually reveal what's going on up here and take out a lot of the nasty players on both sides of the aisle. Is that his
I've
big plan?
watched I've watched cabinet secretary, be blackmailed for what I believe was pedophilia. Greg, I've seen people facing death. I've never seen a person more afraid, irrationally afraid, and willing to do anything. Just, it was almost as though their brain would turn off from the fear. And they literally weren't thinking clearly. So I would say yes, this is something that, because it not only destroys your career, it destroys your relationships with society. These are people who are used to having power, being looked up to, having a certain kind of social credibility. This wipes out not just your career, could wipe out your finances, but your family won't talk to you. You will live the rest of your life in disgrace. So yeah, I think this is partly, you'll see someone like McCain or Graham or Rubio acting beyond crazy. And I'm assuming because they're terrified about something in their control file. Now, is it financial fraud or pedophilia or something? Who knows? But these are people who are acting in extremely irrational and emotional ways, and they're scared to death.
And that's going to be one of Trump's big weapons to crack the control file on both sides of the aisle to back these people off.
Well, not really. Generally, if you're Trump, you don't want to have a pedophilia scandal. You want to get things done because, it's like the Salem witch trial. Everybody stops growing food and starts fighting. And so it's very dangerous to start a scandal like this because you don't know where it will go. You don't know how it'll reverberate. It's very dangerous. And then everybody stops getting things done. So if you want tax reform, if you want a replacement to Obamacare, if you want infrastructure, if you want regulatory relief, I think Trump knows he's got a year or two to really send the economy in the right way. The result of the election is you have millions of small business people and other people across the heartland of America who've got their vigorish back. They're so excited. They're ready to go. They don't care about what some would call the echo chamber and the swamp fighting in the echo chamber. They want real substantive change on the things that can help them make America great. That's what they want. Look at the polls. The polls are very clear. So America, and I think Trump knows that. He's got 2 years to turn this economy around and get it moving in the right direction. And the animal spirits coming bottom up from people being excited about the change is only good for so long. You've got to put real meat and potatoes on the table from Washington. Washington has done a lot to destroy the U.S. economy, and you've got to undo that destruction. And the small business can't just do that themselves. So Trump knows he's got to stay focused on what's really important. Pedophilia scandal can get in your way. Now, if you look at how the squabble's gone, it's looking to me like we're getting to the point where he may not have a choice. If WikiLeaks says that the first round is about 1% of what they have in Vault 7, if they dump out another 99 equivalents of what is there to be dumped out on the CIA, America is going to be in a state of complete shock, which I think will be very healthy. I hope they dump it out. But pedophilia is just the beginning of what's there to be dumped out.
So listen. I want Trump to do well. Actually, I wanted Obama to do well, but I didn't want him to do well
Right.
doing what he was doing. But I had David Stockman on recently, and he said, we're going to hit this hard stop into the debt ceiling, and nobody is going to want to vote for that. And on top of that they're now, in some Wall Street firms are saying that we got a 100% chance of raising the interest rates on March 15th. We're talking about just, this, coming up really soon. And so, can that derail Trump? Can a bond meltdown derail Trump? Can this debt ceiling derail Trump if they get into a gridlock?
Well, in theory, Congress could derail Trump. In theory, I don't think it will happen.
You
And
think
I
they'll
don't.
raise the debt ceiling?
Trump is likely to want to raise the debt ceiling and want to do it on a basis that doesn't require a war. So I think his first strategy is going to be to get an agreement on the debt ceiling. And if you look at what the faction or the sort of the factions who are behind him, they have the capacity to, to blackmail and do whatever they have to do to get it. And if you look at how Congress receives their political support, no matter which side of the aisle on, everybody, Greg, gets their their campaign donations from capital gains. So it doesn't pay to not do a deal on the debt ceiling. So, now Stockman has said a very interesting thing, which he believes there's a chance that Trump would have remarkable sort of dictatorial control to allocate cash flows if they don't get an agreement. So one of the interesting questions is, if Congress won't play ball, is Trump better off taking that pathway? But I think in the first year there's a small chance. That's much more likely to happen in a second year. But if you look at who both sides of the aisle and all different factions are beholden to, everybody's in the interest of bumping the debt ceiling. So I think they'll reach a negotiated settlement before they go out for the recess at the end of July.
And interest rate rise, the Fed. I mean, Janet Yellen's is a big Democrat. So do you think she'd sabotage the Trump camp by raising interest rates and causing a bond meltdown?
The Fed, raising the Fed fund rate is not what raises interest rates. What raises interest rates is the market. The market is raising interest rates. The Fed's going to follow, has to. So if I was the Fed, I would raise interest rates. And raising interest rates is not bad for society, Greg. We've had, this society is being destroyed by allocation of unnaturally cheap capital that's been engineered in a variety of mechanisms. So suppressed interest rates has been bad for capital allocation. It's been bad for pension funds. It's been bad for insurance companies. It's been terrible for savers. If you look at, just take my clients, in 1980 were getting 8% on their bank deposits. Now they're getting 0. How can people live that way? So you've engineered a society which is penalizing the savers and is incentivizing the borrowers. Very bad policy. So I say let's raise interest rates. Capital's not free.
You're not worried about an interest rate rise?
No, I'm worried about continually keeping interest rates at artificially low, low numbers that absolutely causes misallocation of capital.
Okay, I'm holding up your report and your Solari report. There's so much stuff in here, folks. I'm not going to get to it all. You should go to Solari.com and buy a report. So I'm not really going to get to it all, even though I took copious notes, which I'm not even going to get to my notes. But you had 4 scenarios in this report.
Right.
And you weighted them differently, and you said something really amazing. I mean, even you're a very bright individual, and you know money, and you've invested, big money for the, for HUD. You were the assistant housing secretary. I think you managed $300 billion worth of portfolio. You give advice on a lot of stuff. So just so people know, you know big numbers. And you don't know, in this report, you said, hey, listen, the stock market could go to 30,000 or the stock market could go to 10,000. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen. It's a 50-50
so you know me,
explosion.
Greg. Ever since you know me, I've been saying it's going to slow burn. It's going to be slow burn.
And you were right.
But now we're coming into, the runway is now, we're at a runway. And you have thousands of pension funds, insurance companies, and other entities that are now going to go into controlled demolition. So we're seeing pension funds slash benefits and basically say, look, or companies go bankrupt. So you're going to have a series of controlled demolitions on one side. Now, governments can still print money or borrow money, but the governments are going to have to re-engineer their overheads. They're going to have to re-engineer their operations. We've seen corporations re-engineering for new and digital technology for 30 years, and the governments have delayed. If anything, government employment has gone up That's all going to have to change. All at the same time, robotics and new technologies are coming in. So between the controlled demolitions and the re-engineerings, we're coming into a period where change is going to accelerate. It's going to be so rapid. And we have a couple of big variables. Two of the variables I use to create my scenarios are, will the new administration be able to take what is a highly negative return on investment and engineer it to a positive? If they can do that, well, I tell you, the wealth that can be created, Greg, is absolutely fantastic. So that's number one. And the second is, are we going to try and keep trying to preserve a unipolar world or go to a multipolar world? Will we do that successfully or not? If you look at the variation, we can end up in scenarios where the stock market, we're all fine and the stock market goes flying, because part of it is the price of energy is going to keep coming down, down, down. Part of the question is how fast that happens. On the other hand, we could go into if we bet the ranch on trying to stay the global empire and we keep a highly negative return on investment with all these police state tactics, et cetera, because these police state tactics that WikiLeaks is dumping out, they're destroying the economy. They are destroying the economy because they're making sure that the 1% can win whether they perform or not. So you're destroying markets and you're destroying the optimization of capital. Anyway, so there's unbelievably wide variation, and that's why I tell people it's much more important at this time that we get into the business of inventing the future and get out of the business of trying to predict it, because we have a lot of incentive to get it to go to the scenarios where things work very, very well, because the alternative is, unbelievably ugly. So the variation is very wide, and I think it's very important for everybody to understand no administration in Washington can make America great again. We have to make America great again, or we have to make the planet great again, because this is going to be a global phenomenon. And so this comes back to individual responsibility and situational awareness of the money around you, because all we need to do as a practical matter is, if we will each take responsibility to get the money around us working well, that's where the opportunity is. One of the things I have up on my website, we had a great conversation with John Rappaport called Can America Be Great Again? And there's some great links, including a link to the letter I sent to my congresswoman, which is, please get all the webmasters across the government to collect up all the databases about government money by place. All this data is supposed to be available, and let the small business people, the Rotary, the Chamber, download the data. This was the software tool I was making at Hamilton Securities. It was called Community Wizard. Or, since the CIA and Department of Justice and FBI stole Community Wizard, maybe if WikiLeaks would just dump out the tool. It's already, as my good friend Rob Kirby would say, it's already on the shelf. So get the data for your county and start looking for the opportunities. The opportunities to re-engineer government money, the wealth that could be created is fantastic, because the waste and the costs of centralization are enormous, Greg, enormous. So there's a lot of opportunity, but we're going to have to be willing to rock and roll. This could go in many different directions.
And in all your scenarios, and I got to read I'm going to get to one of my notes here that I took down. You talked about in all of them, you said, here's what you need to do no matter what. You need to prep, you need to have cash, you need to retire a debt, you need to avoid government payment, avoid government debt, and you need to have precious metals. Why do you have that kind of a setup as a core investment, precious metals? Why did you say that each and every one of your scenarios?
If you look around the world, the central banking system, all the central banks have core positions in gold. And there's a reason. Gold is real money. It's the hard asset of choice. One of my favorite quotes is, I always say, always have enough gold to bribe the border guards. Now, if you look at the leadership, clearly, I think what the central banks want to do is to run the economy with fiat currency, whether it's the US dollar or Bitcoin. I mean, these are all fiat currencies. At the same time, every central bank has a position in gold, and I think individuals ought to, because in the worst case, if we really do see a breakdown of the financial system, gold is one of the currencies that is going to be able to protect you, and you'll be able to transact globally. Gold is money wherever you go globally. So I'm a great believer. Always have a core position. Now, I divide precious metal investment into two different positions. One is core, which to me is central bank insurance against particularly inflationary environments, which I believe we're in, and the other is investment. So I would say that the important thing and what I stress in the scenarios is always have a core position in precious metals.
And war on cash. We've seen this war on cash go. They want to remove big bills in India. Have done that. They want to remove. There's talk about removing big bills here. Is there going to be a war on cash? You said in the pre-interview that you think that they what they would really like to do is chip us. I mean, could you explain that? Is there a war on cash? Give me your thoughts.
There are two reasons for war on cash. One is if you can move everybody to a digital system, digital fiat currency, you literally have far better intelligence of what's going on. So if you look at their ability to do surveillance, as we've seen from the Vault 7 files, imagine what your ability to do surveillance is if you have everybody's financial transactions in real time, all the time, globally. So a digital currency, now if you can combine that with digital chips, whether it's on your credit card or it's in your hand, as you know, I do believe they literally want to chip everybody, and so they can turn their money on and off. It's pretty scary stuff. But you're talking about complete surveillance, and you're talking about complete economic control and intelligence, but then you have the ability to keep the slow burn going because you have far greater and deeper control of the cash flows. And I think one of the things they're trying to do is extend the slow burn, and it's difficult to do. So you need to dig deeper and have more cash flows you can control and harvest.
And this is the reason why you say, along with PMs, you're saying you need to have some cash. You think people should be holding some cash as well, no matter where you live.
Absolutely. Now, what you see, I'm not so much worried about a general implosion of the economy, but what we've seen around the world is things happening in a particular place. So Katrina happens where you are, the Kentucky power outage happens where you are, and you need to be prepared to deal with that. So I always encourage my clients to have 3 months of provision, whether it's cash, precious metals, and particularly have multiple archives of all their legal and financial documents. So we just need to be prepared for hiccups. And that's why I really encourage scenario thinking. Greg, and we do scenarios once a year. It's a major project, and a major project this year because we couldn't just say it's going to slow burn. And the reason is for investment allocations or business strategy. I think it's very important to say we don't know what the future is going to bring. It needs to go different ways. We need to be prepared to handle different ways. So yesterday was the 8th anniversary of the stock market low in 2009. Who could have imagined on that day that the stock market would go up as much as it had? We've had an 8-year bull run that's incredible. I doubt you and I would have predicted that, and yet we need to be prepared to rock and roll. So not get vested in a particular vision of the future, but be prepared to envision the different ways it could go and understand how to be successful. Because what I want for my clients is I want them to be successful no matter what scenario happens. And the way people get harmed in their investments is to bet the ranch on a particular vision of the future that turns out to be not true.
And one last thing, I hold up your Solari report one last time, and I'll be remiss if I didn't get this in. And I took so many notes that I'm not going to get to. And there's 10 times the amount of material in this book, which I'm flipping through, is food. You made a big deal out of food is number one, and food is not going to remain cheap. Can you just give us your thoughts on that as we close?
Right. One of the reasons I wanted to do this section on food, we have a big food series at the Solari Report, is I wanted people to see the big picture. I have a chart called Food Power, and the countries that have a net deficit or a net surplus on food. Who's a food exporter? Because food, one of the things about food, it has a deeply inelastic demand. People have to have a certain amount of calories if they're going to survive. And there's an extraordinary resources on the planet dedicated to providing that food. Now, food is not on most people's radar as an investment or as a concern because in the developed world, the price of food, or the percentage of food that comes out of our budget, has been falling, and the price stability on food has been great. The price stability on energy, for example, has been much higher, low on food. And so food has not been on the radar for a variety of reasons that I describe in the annual wrap up. I think food is going to start rising as a percent of people's budgets, and it's going to become access to fresh food and quality food is going to become much more of a strategic concern globally. It's going to put the Anglo-American alliance in the catbird seat because we're such a food export juggernaut. It's one of our sort of hidden powers. We've seen a lot more discussion about it with Trump shutting down the TPP. And I think food's going to get on the radar screen. And I wanted to make sure that our subscribers and clients were understanding why food has not been a problem for them up to date, but could become a problem. And they need to think a lot about, just as you pay down your debt or you have a core position in precious metals, where is your local fresh food going to come from? Who's your farmer? And what can you do to make sure you have the right farmers in place? You know, it's funny. I was in Switzerland a couple of years ago and having lunch with a money manager, and he said, "Have you heard about the great new sort of great luxury among money managers?" I said, "No, what's that?" He said, "You know, we just bought a piece of land and have imported a farm family from Eastern Europe, and their job is to grow or access and put together all our food. So we have a dedicated supply that we can trust." Very interesting.
Very interesting. Just like you, Catherine Austin Fitts. It's the Solari report at solari.com. This is just one of the many publications she puts out. I mean, really well done. Very well done. So very nice. Go on. All the links will be for you YouTubers. If you click to the, all links are found at usawatchdog.com. After the interview, you'll see the solari.com website. You could be a subscriber to solari.com and the Solari report. Catherine Austin Fitts, thank you for joining us today on usawatchdog.com. It was very interesting. Thank you.
Thanks. You have a great day.
Okay.